right now. Today's guest is an incredible talent. He's a versatile actor who's had a career success on the film and television screen, but more recently as a voiceover actor as well. You might recognize Omari Newton from such hit shows as Blue Mountain State, from Supernatural, maybe even X-Files, but you probably didn't realize he's voiced some major animated series as well, including Corner Gas. He's the Black Panther. He's T'Challa on Marvel's superhero adventures. And of course, Netflix's #1 hit animated series, The Dragon Prince, as the voice of Corvus. Today with me is Mr. Omari Newton. Omari, thank you so much for doing this and welcome to our show.
That was an awesome intro. First of all, I want to say shout out to Casting Workbook for providing the service to actors during this downtime. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely, and I appreciate that as well. We're definitely interested in trying to find as many new pathways as we can to begin doing our part to give back, and I think this is just one of the ways we're looking at it. It really is the impetus for what I wanted to talk to you about this morning, which is really, as a working voiceover actor, my first question is, of course, the coronavirus hits. How are you feeling? What's the general mood from yourself as a working professional and a teacher as well? How are you feeling about it?
Well, it's definitely a time of some degree of reasonable stress. I don't think I recall, other than maybe like the writer's strike, a time when our industry sort of shut down across the board. And because this is because of a virus and not a labor dispute, the level of uncertainty is high. That being said, as a voice actor, we are affected, but kind of to a lesser extent. And studios have been taking some amazing precautions to make sure that we're safe and everything's healthy. For example, there's some sessions that are still going forward, but usually what would be a group session with a bunch of actors in the booth, they're now doing this individually. They're wiping down the earphones and the microphones between use, and they're having like earphone covers. So
Sure.
I'm worried about it. It's impacted us, but I think we'll get through.
Does it feel like, I mean, as an actor, I guess it's not unusual to have periods where you're working, and of course, periods where you're not working. When the news of this broke, once the initial shock of it sort of goes away, in your estimation, is this really something that we've got to look at from a major crisis level, or could this be, in your estimation, not necessarily different from what working actors are faced with all the time, which is extended periods of hiatus or not work? Is there a difference in how you approach it mentally, or what your outlook is?
Well, it's interesting. I said this to a friend of mine, but in a lot of ways, actors and members of the gig economy are uniquely qualified to deal with situations like this. I don't know I can't remember what the average salary of an actor is, but I know it's certainly under a living wage, like the amount that we make from acting. And of course,
Sure.
if you live in a major city where most of the productions happen in Canada and the States, like whether you in New York or LA or Vancouver or Toronto, you couldn't get by on just an actor's salary. So most of us have side hustles regardless. What's
Yeah.
unique about this is the go-to side hustles for actors have also been impacted. So we have to get even more
No.
creative.
I know. In particular, I know hospitality tends to be a place a lot of working actors gravitate, and it's completely shut down. And it's we've got a bunch of guests coming on the show in the weeks ahead, and we're going to be having this conversation a lot. I guess what I'm curious about though as well is whether it's high season, low season, pilot season, no season, whatever.
Mhm.
You've got to still keep current on your craft.
Yeah.
You teach, of course, at the Vancouver Film School as well,
Mhm.
when you're not on set or you're not in the recording studio.
Mhm.
Um, Talk to me about how you talk to your students. What is your message to them? And, what is the real priority of a working actor right now? Is it, obviously survive and get things bolted down to handle the basics? Or is there still an important focus on developing your craft even in this downtime?
Yeah, I can't remember who it was who said it. Probably I'll attribute it to the late great Kobe Bryant. But I think he said, "If you stay ready, you don't have to get ready." Right? And I think a quote like that applies in times like this, where you know myself and a lot of voice actors, I have a problem anyway. I'm compulsively doing voices my poor wife has to deal with me. Like, I'm incapable of watching a TV show and hearing an interesting accent or an interesting vocal inflection and not doing an impersonation of it. So it's something that I do. And I think it's a story that that you'll find is common with the origin stories of a lot of voice actors is we like to listen and we like to imitate and practice. So if you're not already a huge nerd like me and you're not in the habit of doing that to annoy your family, I would say this now would be a cool time, while you're sitting at home, quarantining and chilling. If you're watching a show, whether it's animated or not, and you think a voice sounds cool, just mess around and see if you can emulate that voice and see what comes out of it. A lot of my cool original character voices came as failed attempts at doing impersonations of other characters.
So, I mean, it can really be for the voice actor or the aspiring voice actor. There's no question that this is that kind of creative downtime that's probably essential anyway.
Yeah. Well, and there's also, there's sites like voices.com or 123 Voice, or, the different kind of curators of voice auditions where if you want to just do a bunch of auditions just as practice to get a sense of what it's like in the marketplace, now would be a good time. The majority of my gigs I book, I tape the audition on my iPhone. There's like most phones come with a voice recorder, but there's great apps like the VRP7 or the Voice Record Pro 7 that literally get under a heavy blanket, get in a closet, get your phone out, get your sides out, and start practicing auditions. And that's a good way to keep your chops up during this time.
Oh, I think that's great. And we're going to, for everybody watching or listening at home, I'm going to make sure we put a link to some of those sites you just mentioned below here in the notes. So take a look for those. What's interesting to me too, Omari, is that I think right now, pre-hiatus, if we can call it that, there was an absolute. You could feel the momentum of this content wave was really, really building. Right, you got, and you and I have talked about this before. You've got 3.5 billion mobile phones active in the world, tiny little screens, and Netflix was just the beginning. I mean, everyone is streaming now. Quibi is
Yep.
weeks away from launching. If you want to call it micro serial content, and of course I think there was a real opportunity for the voiceover actor to really have their moment because animation was probably more and is more abundant than ever before. The hiatus will no doubt end. We get through it. Do you anticipate, is your outlook that the market will resume and it'll be business as usual for content? What's the conversations like with your management team? What's your conversations like with other industry colleagues in the background? Any predictions that you want to go on record with?
I mean, well, with the management team, most agencies right now are being proactive in terms of, social distancing and letting us know that production, there can be an expected slowdown. But for me personally, I anticipate that the industry, I don't know when exactly, but will come back and will come back stronger than ever. And ironically, I think some of the sites that you just mentioned will be some of the few companies who see a surge in business during these times, because the majority of people I know are sitting at home right now watching content. They're watching Netflix, they're playing video games,
Right.
this is all stuff that voice actors work on. So I think, yeah, there's definitely going to be a surge in business. And I think, from a financial standpoint, some of the biggest people engagers are going to see some great quarters because of this. I mean, not to think about this from a profiteering standpoint, but
Of course.
it's just the reality of our business is that people are looking to streaming sites right now.
What's your advice to someone who is thinking like, I dig what you're saying about working on accents and creating voices. There's a lot of actors who have been, if they haven't even admitted it out loud, they're curious and they want to dabble in the voiceover world. They want to make that crossover.
Mhm.
What's your advice? What's the first step, even in the middle of the hype? Something they should be doing or they could be doing, or it's an absolute critical starting point for someone ready to break through. What do you think on that?
Well, first, it's kind of a two-pronged answer. If you're not a professional actor, but you're somebody who consumes content and you've always wanted to be an actor, the first thing you should know is that voice acting is in fact acting. And I know that might seem obvious, but there's some fundamental things, and I would say specifically in terms of style of performance, theater is what you want to look to, where you got to understand the basics of text analysis, how to use your voice, diction and enunciation, vocal projection. So if you're interested in voice acting, first you should take studying the craft of acting really, really seriously, and specifically theater. If you are an established film and television actor and you want to get into voice acting, then it's the same thing where TV and film is all about nuance and subtlety and the audience coming in to see your performance. Voiceover, you're quite literally projecting your audience out. In order for your performance to jump off the screen when it's an animated character, for the most part, it's got to be more broad and a little bit more exaggerated, which isn't to say fake. It's just a different style of performance. And of course, there's different shows. Like Dragon Prince leans more on the naturalistic side, where I've done
Yeah.
some other more cartoony animated shows that are more, theatrical. And it's just understanding the market that you're performing for.
The audio demo reel, for you, I look back at your career, and I mean, this is going to tell you how old I am, but I love that you were doing animated stuff back in the Max Steel days.
Okay.
I've got two kids, and one of them remembers all your old stuff, and my baby boy, he knows all your cool new stuff. Has the acting, like a lot of acting for film and TV, I think we could say that over the decades, over the years, has evolved, and there's new ways and new ideas. Has voiceover acting evolutionary or growth curve? Does that make sense what I'm asking? Is there more? I know you teach courses on it. Talk to me about how it has changed, in particular around your career over the years.
Well, see, it's interesting to think of myself as like an OG voice actor is kind of surreal, but I guess it has been a decade now that I've been doing this. But yeah, because there's some guys who've been doing this since the '80s, right? But
Yeah.
what I have noticed because of the increased demand for content and the boom in terms of animation, I feel like in the earlier days, cartoons were something that were considered more for kids primarily. And
Yeah.
I know a lot of adults now who watch cartoons, and I shouldn't even say cartoons, who watch animated series, because that's really what they are, in the
Yeah.
same way they would watch live action series, where this isn't something to entertain kids. Like there's some really profound storylines and moving, nuanced performances. So I think the major shift I've seen is people recognize, well, in particular in video games. In the early days of video games, the oftentimes the voice performances were very cartoony and they're almost kind of comedic.
Yeah.
And now people are recognizing that the market extends beyond just kids, and they're really catering to people with different levels of
I
sophistication.
mean,
So
look at Call of Duty, right? I mean, the
yeah,
sophistication of the storyline. The actors there are trying to do a Tom Clancy novel, right?
it's crazy. Well, I laughed about this, but so there's this video game called Last of Us, right?
Oh, I know. Whoa, what a great game.
So I've never played the game. I watched a 2-hour gameplay like I was watching a feature film. The,
Yeah.
sto- the
Yeah.
story was so good and the performances were so good. I just on YouTube watched someone play the game like I was watching a movie. It was incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think they're actually producing that. It's going to film.
I surprised
After
me. Yeah.
Uncharted, Sony is doing that. That's another great one where the performance capture.
Oh,
Talk to me a bit about that too, because you've got some very sophisticated and adult, storylines now in video games in particular, and even in the animated ones
mhm.
that are on TV now. It's some people I think might limit voice acting, or there's a belief that you've got to have accents and some creative voices, but I think it's a lot more than that. And you've said that before, that trying to even convey sarcasm or cynicism, or trying to the timing of a joke in animation, like a show like Family Guy or
Mhm.
or Rick and Morty, or things where you've got a much more adult audience. How do you rehearse and get ready for that? Tell me about the process for something like that. Is that harder to do than, say, when you are being Black Panther on Marvel superhero adventures? What's that like?
Well, you brought up a really good point. I would say the majority of voice actors get hired to do their voice, and they're really good at embodying themselves in different situations. And I guess there's of course there's some incredible voice actors, guys like Hank Azaria, who they can just do every and any voice, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of times you get hired to do your specific voice because you do it well. I can't remember the name of the actor, but the guy on Bob's Burgers, right? He's amazing, he's hilarious, but I'm pretty sure he's doing his own voice, right?
I think it's John H. Benjamin. Is he the one who does Archer as well?
I think
Maybe.
so. I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
got sort of
Totally.
this gruff sort of, yeah. I can't really do it, but it's yeah.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the first thing, is that while you can definitely be more employable and play more characters in an individual session if you have the ability to transform your voice, if you can't do accents and dialects or change which resonator you speak from, that doesn't necessarily mean you're limited from working in voice. You might just have such a cool and unique voice that you get hired to do a specific thing really well.
Got it. Okay. So talk to me like I'm the aspiring voice actor, and say comparatively to a traditional working actor for film or television who wants to have a couple. Maybe they've got some theater background, maybe they've done commercials, maybe they've always done film or television. They've got comedy, maybe they can't do or they can do those things. The voice, what's essential to the voiceover actor's skill set or toolkit, and how, if you were to say these are the critical ones to be working on and developing, especially right now, what would you say those are?
I would say definitely diction and enunciation. And I made a point to really enunciate both of those.
Yeah, yeah.
And vocal projection. I think vocal projection, diction, and enunciation. I mean, this is an obvious one, but if you struggle with cold reading, or if you struggle with reading in general, I'm not saying that this eliminates you from doing it, but it's definitely something that you'll want to work on because, you know, oftentimes you'll be in a studio and you'll get changes on the day. They'll give you new pages, or if you're doing pickups, and you got to just pick stuff off the page and just dive in right away. So make sure that you're good at sight reading and understanding scripts quickly. And I think the two of those things are a really good start. Oh, and another important one, you have to not be afraid to be goofy and ridiculous. You can't have any self-consciousness in the booth because most of the times voice actors they're fully invested. Their body's moving, they're making crazy faces. It's all about what the viewer is going to get from the screen. Don't worry about what you look like in the studio. It's all in service of the story.
Talk to me about what you should be doing to keep yourself fresh, to keep yourself from going crazy, especially with people who are self-quarantining and keeping social distancing. A lot of opportunity to be consuming content or practicing stuff. What's your advice to your students? What's your advice to anyone who, in particular, those voice actors who want to come out of this as fresh and ready to go?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing, of course, is stay healthy, right?
Yeah.
And this is an important thing for voice actors. Like if you got a cold, these directors have a really good ear. If they hire you to do a voice and you're sick or whatever and your voice is messed up, they can hear it and it might mess up a session. So stay healthy as much as you can. And I would say this is a great time to start practicing. It's a great time to get in there. If you've never done it before, you got some free time, spend your time at home in as constructive a way as possible. If you literally just Google, animation stock scripts, a bunch of them will come up. There's some cool ones you'll see online from shows that you might actually know if you want to just, see what an animation script looks like. But just set concrete goals about what you want to accomplish during this lockdown so that when you come out of it, you're stronger than when you started.
Yeah, I guess it is repetition, isn't it? Like anything, it's
Yeah.
how much you're exercising that muscle. I'll put a link to any of those sites as well. From a technology at home perspective, any particular software, any particular apps or things that you have been really helpful to you as a voiceover actor?
Well, right now I'm at the point where I do 90% of my auditions from home, and I just do them on my iPhone, which surprisingly has an amazing microphone. In fact, I used to have that snowball microphone that I see with you, and I found that my phone was actually better, and it was actually easier to use it because you can easily upload stuff to, Dropbox or whatever.
Right, right.
Um, so definitely the Voice Record Pro 7 is awesome. If you've got more of a budget, if you jump on YouTube and you type in how to build a home studio, there's a number of really useful videos that will walk you all the way through it. I'm not yet set up at the point where I can do like a pro level recording from my house, but I can do auditions pretty effectively. So when, they'll get a sense of my voice and I can go into the studio. So yeah, you just need,
Awesome.
you basically need a laptop and an iPhone and you're good.
Right on. And Omari, in the as we're sort of closing out here, I really appreciate the insight. This is more helpful than you know. I think there's a lot of people just trying to figure out what's the best use of their time when they're not working on their craft, when they're not working on their career. We've got some time to watch some content. What's your picks? What are the best animated things out there right now you think people should be checking out if they're looking for some of the best time well spent?
Well, this is just shameless, but I believe it. If you haven't seen Dragon Prince yet, you should definitely watch it.
Of course, of course.
And I'll recommend a non-animated show. I just watched this incredible Korean zombie show called The Kingdom.
Somebody
which
else told me about this too.
it's like if Game of Thrones, Walking Dead, and Crouching Tiger were that's no understatement. It takes place.
Is it on Netflix?
It's on Netflix, and
Okay.
from a voice actor standpoint, it's not subtitled; it's dubbed over. So the whole time I was watching it, thinking about like how amazing of a job these actors did, and I don't do as much dubbing. I've done a little bit in like ADR type of stuff, but it's
Yeah.
really interesting to listen to the American voices doing these Korean characters and thinking about how they were able to realize these characters in a different language.
Yeah, well said. And of course, what season 3 now for Dragon Prince, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, that's huge. You guys are the number one rated animated show there. My son loves the show,
Awesome.
and always happy to mention that. I think that's really cool. You're on that. The other one that I thought was really interesting, while we're on that Netflix vein, I don't know if you caught. A lot of people caught Narcos or Narcos Mexico, but there's an adjacent, unrelated El Chapo. That they did that was based in and produced in Mexico, and the voiceover, of course, is they've Americanized it and they've put the English voiceover. And I'd be interested to get your professional critique the next time we've got you on the show, because I can't tell now in such a globalized world where the content has to be so many languages, there's becoming this huge demand for voiceover actors to not only be able to deliver the lines, but be the American or the Polish or the Russian equivalent of whoever that character is.
Yeah,
And this was really interesting. I think they did a good job.
yeah.
We'll see. We'll see in the comments after we post this if anybody agrees or disagrees with me. But I'd recommend that one too.
Great. I'll have to check that out. Yeah. Well, and it's funny
Sitting,
when you said that, you made me think of I grew up in Montreal, Quebec, and it was always funny. The Simpsons would air in French, and it was like Quebec French, and I always found it hilarious, like who Quebec Homer was. Like there's entire like
yeah,
hundreds
right,
of thousands of kids in Montreal think Homer sounds like this French guy from like Saint Laurent Street.
yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Talking with Omari Newton, voiceover actor with a string of hit animated stuff to his resume. We're talking about the downtime right now, the hiatus that has taken the industry by storm, and really, that's an understatement. It's pushed pause. Some really helpful advice there for voiceover actors, for aspiring voiceover actors. Omari, I really appreciate you coming on the show. Will you come back and do it again sometime with us soon?
Anytime, it's my pleasure.
And that's Omari Newton. Thanks, everyone. And thank you, Omari. We'll be back again for another episode of Casting Workbooks at Home Live. Thanks for tuning in.
Take care, everyone. Stay healthy. These kind of attacks on prime minister. Not to mention the fact